My name is Joshua, and I'm a senior music teacher at the I was explaining three pieces for you, and then I thought these out just with the instrument, and give me the three pieces. What's the reason of that? I am a senior music teacher, and I participated in Pep Band, Pep Band here, and after that year, I was in the Philharmonic orchestra for a week and a tour of art. I was born in Wiesbaden, Germany, into a military family. My family was retired afterwards. We moved around a lot at this time, and then we lived in Joplin, Virginia for about 2000. I was moving to Virginia for another part of teaching at Zoom, and to make the fact the way my feet work, as well as like that, my hands, my feet, and other things. I've had a career of 45 something, whatever. So enough about that. You didn't tell me to do that. You hear music, and you hear me talk about percussion. Now I have one thing I'm going to explain one suite of percussion standards I learned in class. Government and to accompany dancers and other facilities. The husband was failed, and it was husband and explain with one chick and the other chick, they made a fight. Now, the fight is the people that is explained with one fail. But then when you add the fight you need two big hands. You have to get a different foot in the fight, but it's up. According to a doctor, this is safe if I died out, it's nothing. made its way into the upper in Preston, America, right as it was possible. That was the kick command and the right time. It became idea of Venezuela displays an instrument that was previously designed by Tristan, mainly the piano and the weeklong and the pistol. And this measures the introduction of the drum set. And it figures that the piano over here, the piano and the weeklong, you have a light finger and a hi-hat. And sometimes you don't have a back finger. It's the furniture that like it. And these are some of the other instruments in this place. And these are the trimer, mallet. There's another instrument shaped like a trimer. But usually when I hang it, have it hanging, and then when you play it, it'll resonate. It's kind of a way. And it uses different kinds of feelings, depending on the time of it. And you start the scaffolding over here. It's loud. The edge is usually wooden. And the banana fingers on the limb are kind of the scaffolding is a lot of rock and fun music, and it's run in many other songs of music. It's really not the group. It's really fun. And then you have to have a fake drum. You know, fake drum is a rock drum that has a deep down in it. Right. Six drums. And now you've got the different, not only you have five cylinders, you have to have the second cylinder, and then as you start with the first thing, you have the light cylinder and the hi-hat. And then you have the 50. The unique thing about the 50 is, although it gives you can light on non-fixed, you can light on it as if it was non-fixed. However, it does have a pitch. You can change the pitch by pushing the pedal up or down. And they're usually 2 to 5 drums, depending on what you need. Now that we have percussion on the inside, indoor percussion is on there. Outside percussion is not there. The Russian jazz drum is different from the classic jazz drum in that it sounds cheaper, and the thing is, the more power is projected in certain areas outside. And then you have the pedal drum. Sometimes they have 2, they have 5, and then you might even have another rhythm drum over there. And then you start two is with, on the east side with a lady, natural mentally, that created a blessing of a liberated God and the bliss of his own. The tradition of Melissa of Sunday today in the rural areas of Guatemala and Mexico and Africa. Modern Melissa, artistically constructed a first week, and the motivators are made of black, no, good. I mean, the full feet to the vessel and the full of the feet. That's not always the case as far as the feet. The best way to say full time is to say that's going to be full of them in the vessel. Because the feet might not see as the full of them. The feet will start out at 3 foot, 5 or so. But when the melody starts, the melody is going to be in 2 foot and 3 foot. And the beat is going to be 2 foot out and 2 foot in the 3 foot. The 2 foot is going to be in a 2 foot out left beat. The 2 foot typically you're thinking 1, 2, 3, 4. But in after this it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. After the 6-bar introduction, the A section is started. The right hand melody and the left hand is going to play perfect chords in the accompaniment. And that section is going to be repeated, but it's going to be flipped, and it's going to be the perfect chords in the right hand and the left hand and the melody. And now we just made the series of the Spanish chords and then the blues. And that's going to be a feed section. It's going to be a really interesting concept. It's going to be over the 16th note, each of the first scale degree and the 5th scale degree. And it's going to be alternating between the mallet.
playing any music, Sepehr?
A little bit.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Sepehr. Today I'm going to be giving you a presentation about popular music. So a little bit about me. I'm multidisciplinary. Through my time at Mary Washington, I have been heavily involved in economics, music, computer science with focus in big data and data analytics. So the time came for me to do a project that shows everything I've learned at this school and in the music department. I decided I would do the following. I'm going to explain. So there's a wealth of data out there, especially nowadays. We're going into this age of just data everywhere. And this in music is no different. So it's relatively new because a lot of people in the field of music don't have a lot of the skills required to do a lot of big data analytics. So doing analytics on music is still sort of new, sort of cutting edge. So what I decided to do was analyze pop music trends throughout 80 years. So starting in 1940. I'll talk more in detail as I go along. So I'm going to first talk about my research methods, how I got the data that I did, and this might be the part that you guys won't be as familiar with because it's going to be sort of comp sci heavy, a little bit comp sci, don't be scared. Just raise your hand if you have any questions because it's going to be really dense. This goes for the whole thing. It's a fairly dense presentation, and if I wait for the end for you guys to ask questions, it won't work. So just pop your hand up whenever. So gathering was the first step. It's just to gather data. I used an application programming interface. So what is that? It sounds really scary at first, but it's really not. So whenever I go onto Google, for example, and I want to type something into the search bar, I press enter and I get back, for example, a picture of a dog, okay? What if I wanted to find every single breed of dog and then write down the height for that breed of dog? I couldn't do that, just one by one typing it all in. It would take forever. So what this allows is it gives you an interface. So I can write code that goes out, gets me the data, and comes back. It does this really, really quickly. I can write it automated. And so I use this to gain a lot of different things, and I'll explain this later. So I use 3 application programming interfaces. So you have different ones for different things. So there might be an application programming interface to get info on dogs. So in my case, I use the Echo Nest. This is the company that was recently acquired by Spotify. And they have a lot of data on specific attributes of music, and I'll show them specifically later. Music Match is an API for music lyrics, so you can search music lyrics that way. And then I use Microsoft for cognitive services, and I'll explain what that is more a little bit later, because that came out only a couple days ago, so I decided to incorporate that. Another way that I gather data was through web scraping, and this is way more rudimentary than APIs. So all this is really simply is you write a code that goes on the site and straight takes what it sees. So this is where I got the list of the top 10 or the top 100 ranging for pop music. It's called the Ultimate Music Database, and it's pretty hideous. As you can see, this is per week. So this shows August 3rd, 1940, the top 10 songs. Okay? So it's really basic, and you can't do anything with this. You can't download it into an Excel spreadsheet. You can't really use this data except to look at it. And if I was just going to go week by week for every week since the 1940s, I would never get this done. This is one reason that having a little bit of comp sci knowledge is really helpful when going to do something, because it opens up doors that you would never be able to do before. So I wrote some code that went through and took every single week since 1940 to now, took that data, then sent it off to those other APIs that I was talking about before, sent to Echo Nest to get some metadata on it, sent it to Music Match to get some lyrics info, and I'll talk about what I did with Microsoft a little bit later. So then I had to store it. This is another interesting problem that people don't often think of because we are not used to dealing with tons of data. So if I had no knowledge of if I had no database knowledge, and I'll explain more later, I would just use an Excel spreadsheet, right? So this usually works for most cases. So if I had even 100 different data points. But in my case, we're dealing with 300,000 data points. So if you want to try to imagine an Excel spreadsheet with 300,000 points of data in it across 30 different dimensions. So by dimensions, I just mean how many columns. So height and weight would just be 2 dimensions. So 30 different dimensions. It's insane. Like you cannot even start to work with it in an Excel spreadsheet. Yeah, you just can't do it. So the solution is to use a server, okay, a database. In my case, it's a SQL server, and a C# is not a music thing. In this case, it's the programming language I used. So how does the database work? So this is a database schema. So this is how data is stored inside of the database. So this is a fascinating concept that I'm about to explain to you. In a database, you divide things up into columns, and you link those columns together. So this is the artist. It's the artist table. This is the track info table, and this is position info table. Okay. So real self-explanatory. All the artist data goes inside the artist table. Track info goes into track, and then where the position of the track was goes into the position info. And so the easiest way to explain this is imagine each of these being file cabinets. Okay. So I have file cabinet for artist, track info, and position info. For example, I walk up to the artist file cabinet, I open it up, I take out Taylor Swift's file, okay? All it has in it is artist info about Taylor Swift, nothing about her songs. And then imagine that file, like folder, has strings coming out of it, going to all of her tracks in a different file cabinet. Okay, so if I wanted to get all of Taylor Swift's tracks, I would simply follow the string across, and it'd probably be like 5 or 6 different strings, and I would have access to all those. Then I'd pull out the track, and then that would have a bunch of strings going out into all the positions that it's been on. So it was on position 2 this week, 12 this week. Some great advantages here. If I want to make a change to Taylor Swift's name, I don't have to make the change everywhere, right? Because the string automatically connects it. If I was using an Excel spreadsheet, I would have Taylor Swift's name, the song, the position, and then down it would be the same replicated position over and over and over again. Really wasteful, really hard to use. Not to mention that you wouldn't be able to actually run anything, you wouldn't be able to search through it really efficiently either. So it's just another example. So I left my computer running for a week, and I gained 12,000 artists, 35,000 tracks, and 348,000 data points total. Okay, so that's a lot of data to work through. Okay. So the other part of this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the metadata, which I'm going to show, is machine learning. So these data fields are what I found. This is what EchoNest provides you. Okay. These, a lot of them sound extremely subjective, and coming from, people think, oh, machines don't understand emotion, and they don't. Okay, they don't understand emotion, but they can learn to identify emotion. How do they do that? You teach it. To put it very plainly, not really complicated, just say, hey, computer, here is a song that's very acoustic. Here's a song that's moderately acoustic. Here's a song that's not acoustic at all. And then over time, computers are really good at getting the tiny, tiny little details and tiny little differences in sound that even we wouldn't really be able to perceive and come up with scores for all these things. So acousticness just means how many acoustic, not how many, but how acoustic is the song, really rudimentary way of explaining that. If it was just a drum in a room with nothing, then that's extremely acoustic, so that gets an acoustic score. On the other hand, if it was a song made completely inside of a computer, okay, it gets an acoustic score of 0. Danceability, also really obvious, I never really use it. Danceability, duration is in seconds. Energy, again, it's a subjective term, but just how much energy something has. So Bach cantata would be really low on that, and then Van Halen would be high. Then we have key signature, liveness, which I didn't use, just if it's playing in front of a live audience. How loud it is in decibels. Mode is nothing like crazy. This is just major or minor. Tempo and BPM. Time signature, and then valence is a psychology term, just meaning how happy something is. It incorporates both energy and tempo and mode. So it's just like an aggregation. So finally, to visualize the data, I didn't use Excel. obviously for the reasons I said before. Yes? Yes?
Lyrics, why weren't lyrics in there?
So lyrics aren't part of the echo list.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, anyway, any other questions? I'm sorry, I'm sort of fast. No? Okay, finally, to visualize, I use Tableau. So Tableau is a business intelligence tool. If you go ahead and like start to apply for jobs doing businessy things, you'll see this more often than Excel a lot of times for the reasons that I mentioned before. It's just a way of it's just a really good way of visualizing really multi-dimensional data. So, before I start actually showing the charts, there's some things I have to clarify, some technical challenges. So, weighted versus unweighted results. What does this mean? So, the way that the data gathering worked is every single week we would get the top 50 to 100 songs, whatever it happened to be. Okay? Well, what if a person appears multiple times, right? So Taylor Swift is number 1 or number 3 or whatever for a month, right? Do you count Taylor Swift as being, as appearing multiple times, or do you only count her the first time she showed up or the last time she showed up? So you're going to see weighted or unweighted at the top. Weighted just means that I'm incorporating how many times something appeared. So if something appeared 100 times, it's going to count more as something that appeared once. And unweighted is just the opposite. So brief history of the top charts, just so we get an understanding here. The Billboard 100 was started in 1940 it had 3 different categories. So it would look at jukebox data, it would look at radio play, and it would look at store sales, okay? And they would only do top 10 until 1958. Then 1958, they put all these things together, and we have what the Billboard that we know today. They went up to 150 songs. And then they pared it back down to 100 around 1970. Also something you know, when we're looking at a time period this wide, in the 1940s, music, the Billboard charts weren't exactly representative of what was, it wasn't very democratic, okay? A record cost $40, so poor people didn't have as much access to music as they do now. Just something to keep in mind. Okay, this is not a chart I made, okay? This is just a note on pseudoscience, really quick, okay? I found this chart on a pretty reputable website dealing with data in general, okay? So they're charting rock quality versus US oil production, okay? And then they're talking about, oh, look at this, they're so related, so there must be some sort of relation between oil production and rock music quality. And the way they got rock music quality was they took Rolling Stone's top however many songs of all time, and they just looked at how many came from whichever years. And so their theory is that this shows peak oil, so whenever we achieved the maximum amount of oil that's easy to get and the rest of the oil is hard to get. So their argument was all the easy songs have been written, so now all that's left is hard songs, so there's less of them. Absolutely ridiculous. So you won't see me doing this kind of weird correlation stuff, and I'm really going to try to stay away from making these kinds of judgments. So this is our first chart. And you guys can follow along in the pamphlet I gave out. So yeah, it's just to get an idea for the layout, because we're going to see a lot of these charts as we go along. So I'm starting with a fairly simple one. So we see a very typical trajectory. First, let me actually just show what this is. So we see median tempo on the y-axis, and then the year on the x-axis. So this starts in 1940 and it goes up to February of this year. And we can see that there's just a nice arc. You'll see that a lot of things will center around 1981. And in 1981, rock music started to lose popularity. That's a really important date because rock has been really big in the 20th century. And so when rock started to die down and then R&B took its place, and we'll go more into this later, we can see the tempos start to fall. This is median tempo only looking at the first positions. We can just see that it's relatively the same sort of arc. just more diverse. I won't split into position one anymore because a lot of them just look like this. So this is acousticness versus year. Okay. It's exactly what we'd expect to see. This is sort of a mic check in a way. It's just to make sure that our data is accurate. You know, if I saw acousticness rising over time, I'd know something was wrong. Some nice things though, that it's actually plateaued. It's important to notice. So there's actually a limit to how electronic people actually want to hear something. Is important to realize out there, especially looking at the top charts. The potential to make 100% electronic sounding music has been there, but it hasn't become ubiquitous. It hasn't become taking up all of the charts. And if the trend would have held, like this 30-year trend, then we would have gotten there. But clearly we've reached the point at which people are like, we don't. This is a max that's good for electronics. So this shows mode over time, and so this is like sort of like a pie chart, but it's like flipped on its side. So the more of green you see, the more major the charts have been, and the more orange you see, the more minor it's been. Songs have been getting more minor over time. Not quite to overcome the major songs, but there's been a lot more minor songs. Okay, so I know this looks like crazy, but I'm just going to explain it real quick. So this is unweighted key, and this is the last time some of you saw this. I've actually split it into major and minor. So I know I didn't write it exactly how I identified that, but it's already so complicated. So if you look in each layer, and this is key going down in half steps, going up in half steps down on the chart. There's a little line separating, if you can see that. On top is minor, below is major. So this is C minor, this is C major. Easy way, if you forget that, just know that C major is way more popular than C minor is, and you can just double check up there. See that the area for C major is way bigger. So a couple things we can see on this chart, that keys have sort of standardized. So up until 1940s, 1951, when there was a lot of jazz, it was it wasn't stable at all. So there wasn't this consensus on what keys were probably best to use, which is really strange. A lot of things I can't explain by looking at these charts. It's just behavior. We can also see that B flats has been decreasing in popularity in favor of B flat minor. So B flat major has been decreasing in popularity, and that's because horns have become a lot less popular, and strings, like guitars, have become a lot more popular. We can break this down even further. So this is all keys. This is all major keys, total counts. Okay. So in order of most of these. So C major is the most popular major key, going down to G, D, etc. So we can see a pattern here, right? So G no sharps, C no sharps, no flats. If we go to 1 sharp, 2 sharps, 3 sharps, then I guess composers decide, oh, it's too many. We're going to go back down to 1 flat. But then we see something really weird, and that's that C sharp major is the next most popular key. I thought this was a complete fluke. Okay, I was really confused. Who would use C sharp major? It's an awful key. It really is. So luckily, Spotify has released 1 chart, and that is total keys. So they took all the songs in their database ever, and they just said, these are the most popular keys. Don't know why, but it was really convenient that they did that. And they actually have the exact same thing. So I find that C sharp is in the exact same position in terms of popularity on their chart too. So it's not just like a top thing, and it's not wrong. It's like a global truth here that people are using C sharp major as a key that they really enjoy. So, yes?
This is where I get excited. All right, so what's the blue the most?
C major.
The second?
G.
Third?
D.
Then?
A.
And then?
F.
F, and then C sharp? So C sharp is first capo position, right?
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, so, well, all right, so C is the most popular, right? And so then basically the singer Like, oh, I can't sing that low, so they put the capo on the first fret and they keep the C shape while they're playing guitar. And this is really cool. This is what I wanted you to investigate. That would have been really awesome.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, I've been asking around a lot. I can find.
And then what's after C sharp?
A flat. Yeah, I forgot the
So if I
pattern
put
breaks
first
down.
capo on, what is it? Or no? First capo. G or no? A flat. That would be B. No. G, yeah. That would be one up from G. Which is G the second one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's first capo, first fret capo for G. And then what's after A flat?
B flat.
Which is first capo after? B flat, he said. It would go up a half step, right? A. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, A. So they correlate.
Okay.
I mean, to me, it's a capos, right? Maybe I'm wrong, right? Guitar players?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a while I thought it was just like people pitch bend C up a little bit or something like that, and so the computer's recognizing it wrong, but yeah, cable makes way more sense.
Guitar players rule in a land of guitar players. I'm not a guitar player.
Okay, so let's look at minor now, just minor total overall. We find that B minor is the most popular. I would have expected A minor to be the most popular, but it's not. Again, B minor is. Maybe that's a capo thing again, but I think I asked you last night and you said.
Well, no, I mean, I was in the middle of something when you asked me, and it's like the day before your presentation. Now, all right, so if it's B minor, what is B minor in the key of?
D.
D, right? So what do you have to do in minor keys that you don't have to do? You also need that fifth chord, right? So what is the fifth of D? A.
Right.
Right? You know, I don't know why it is that way, because obviously the 5 chord is E major. We want to think about like the ease of playing and what shapes people are used to doing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I come from a piano background, so it doesn't make any sense to me. B is like awful. B is awful chord. Yeah. So to me, I look at this, I'm like, why? So yeah, I decided that I really did expect A minor to be the first one, okay? Because C major was the most popular, so why wouldn't it be A minor? So I broke it down. This shows the key popularity, shaving off the first half of the 20th century, only keeping 1988 to 2016. Okay, and we find that B minor stays, and look how far A minor drops. And that's again, probably because guitars are way more popular in composition. And if we reverse it, and we do 1940, 1975, we see that A minor pops up, and then F minor also pops up. So, okay, so this craziness, okay? This is what raw data looks like if I just kept genre info. So each of these is a genre, and they grow and die in popularity as time goes on. This is if I just kept that, but I'm not going to keep this whole thing. We're going to shave it down, and only if things reach 5% popularity, we're going to keep them. So we can see some obvious things. This blue line is jazz. We're going to see jazz die really hard, really fast. Let's get it done. We can see that rock music has been the most popular genre for most of the 20th century, and it's been dying. It's been dying. You know, it's really far from its peak in 1981. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Also important to see that this little red line, that's disco. Okay. Very few things have that kind of trajectory with disco where they rise over the course of, say, 5 years, and then suddenly one day they just evaporate off the face of the earth. Okay? But then again, very few genres have an anti-movement. So in 1979, there was a really strong anti-disco movement. Don't know why people were so hating on disco so much, but there's a really strong anti-disco movement. And you can go back and find that there was a day that disco died, Disco Demolition Day. I don't know, some of you might remember this, some of you might not. But in 1979, they had this baseball game, and there's a band called Disco Demolition, where you bring your disco records and they put them on the field and blow them up. doesn't make any sense to me, okay? Maybe things were different back then, but you put your carton of, they had a carton of disco records and they just exploded them. The crowd went wild, ran onto the field, game ended. And from that point on, disco disappeared. Again, I don't even understand why this was such a big deal that people did this, but it apparently had enough of an effect that it destroyed disco. We can also note that 1981 was the peak of rock music. A couple things happened in 1981, massive recession, and also MTV came out. So I say that MTV probably is what killed rock and roll, and rock in general, not rock and roll, just rock. And if you try to even look up what killed rock music, you'll find that MTV is the most popular reason. And it's just uncanny that's that exact same year. This is just top 10 filtered. Just a little detail thing to notice to see how much bigger disco is. So we usually think of the 70s as being disco time, right? But if we look at the previous chart, you see that's really, really small amount of songs with disco. If we look at only the top 10 filtered, so these are only counting songs that made the top 10, you can see that's way more popular. Okay, this is average decibels over time, new chart. Okay, this is how loud things have been getting. So the higher it goes, the louder things have been getting. We can confirm the loudest scores exist doing this, right, using actual data. So we can say there's a really large plateau for most of the 20th century. But then in 1990, 1991, when CDs and digital format became really popular, we see music start to increase in loudness again. Something scary to know is that we haven't plateaued yet. So I don't know how much louder music is going to get on average, but that's just scary to realize. Also, we can see that this is the first time we've had music growing in loudness. In the 1940s, we had the same thing, driven by jukeboxes, oddly, because you hear music on a jukebox, people would try to one-up each other, but you would hit a ceiling with analog formats like that. So song duration, sliders can't see, not much here, except that if we notice again, in 1981, when rock music started to decline, we can start to see that decline in duration of music happened again. We can say that duration of music was largely driven by rock music. Okay, this is loudness by genre, really self-explanatory. Again, sort of mic check. You can see that jazz is the softest on average, and hip hop and rap being the loudest on average. This is a really weird chart that I made. I sort of made my own metric here. I was interested in seeing how much change is there in genres. So for example, if in 1981 everything was rock, the next year everything was R&B, then I would want to see a really high number here, okay? So this is churn, this is genre churn. So how much volatility there is in the chart market, if you want to say market. So we can see on average that the volatility of genres has been sort of stable. Things turn over at a very stable rate. There aren't many spikes where suddenly things flip, genres die and come to light in a very stable way. There's nothing too unpredictable. So let's talk about lyrical sentiment. Okay, so this is what I use lyrics for. So Microsoft I was talking about earlier. I fed the lyrics to a sentiment analyzer. So what is that? So this is a business tool. This is almost exclusively for business, what people use, but I'm using it for music. So say I put a product on Amazon and I want to see if people like my product or not, but I have like 20,000 reviews. I'm not going to sit and read 20,000 reviews. I use a sentiment analyzer, which just says, is this review happy? Like, is this review positive or is this review negative? And it does this by reading it, and again, machine learning, science, magic, it does this thing, okay? You can read and learn on its own. So, I'm about to play you the lowest sentiment. It's sort of a pretty large tie for lowest sentiment, but I'm playing you the lowest sentiment song. Just pay attention to how the lyrics aren't necessarily sad, like they don't sound sad in the words, they're more sad in a more broad sort of way. So he didn't say anything particularly like sad, but it was like the idea. You know, none of those words on their own are particularly sad. So that's just supposed to prove that sentiment analyzers look at a more broad sort of scope. High sentiment was happy. Go figure. You know that song by Pharrell. That was the happiest song. I'm not going to play that for you because I think it's sort of annoying at this point. So this is lyrical sentiment charting. So again, put simply, how happy or sad songs have been getting over time. So a score of 1, which is nothing really achieved 1, would be really like, yeah, really happy. And then a 0 would be just the pits of despair. And we can see that music in general is pop music is pretty positive in general. Okay, it's not what people think, where it's just like really, really depressing and stuff. It's generally people want to be happy, so music is generally happy. So we can see some declines here. And this, I'm not the first to do this kind of research into looking at sentiment and how it works over time. And people have even actually used it for economic indicators. So, but this is the first time that anyone's used it. Anyone's used actual sentiment analysis tools to do this. People have looked at like keywords, like how many times this word appears, that word's appear, to try to map sentiment. But it's the first time anyone's used an actual sentiment analysis tool. So we can see, starting from the earliest point, 1981. Okay, and so we're going to try to use this for an economic, to try to figure out economic indicator. So, anyone remembers Paul Volcker of the Federal Reserve? Not going to go into that. There was a great inflation during that time, and he spiked interest rates way high, caused a recession. Okay, so we can see that people actually started listening to more sad music right here. There's another recession here, 1987. A huge one here, so this is 2000, okay? People remember the dot-com bubble. It's a massive decline, like an unprecedented decline. And you know, it'd be great if we could see, if people listen to music a lot in the Great Depression, but we would think that we'd see the same thing over here, the same decline in positivity. And then again, around 2008, with the Great Recession, then we could see another decline, right? So there's strong evidence to support the fact that people listen to more sad music, when the economy's bad. Okay, so this has a couple applications. You could use it to again just see how the economy's doing. People use unemployment a lot of the time. People use GDP. You could use lyrical sentiment. Again, with some tweaking. If you made a lyrical sentiment analysis, if you made a sentiment analyzer just for music, this would probably be a lot more accurate. So I decided next step was to see lyrical sentiment versus valence. And I was thinking I'd see, first, remind you what valence is. Valence is how happy the song sounds, not including lyrics. So I would think that songs that sound more happy, would have more happy lyrics. Not the case at all. There's no relation between how a song sounds and how happy the lyrics are. Really weird. So,
Did you break that down by years? Because maybe it's because people are so snarky now. You know what I'm saying?
People are snarky.
Well, I mean, I guess that's a bad thing, but there's a lot more sad sounding, happy lyrics, happy sounding with sad lyrics.
Okay, actually though, I actually took and looked at some of these weird ones where it's really sad sounding, but really happy lyrics. There's a lot of Barbara Streisand down there. So maybe not. But yeah, it's something to do. So what's next for this? A lot more analysis needs to be done. Again, taking 20 different dimensions. There's so many different ways you can cut them, and I'll be walking down campus and always think of something new. I mean, I was adding new charts to this, until the last day because I keep coming up with new ways of splitting this data up. I also want to make some of my own machine learning tools that are more specified towards music because musical lyrics are a little bit harder to find the sentiment of. And there's been work done at Berkeley where they try to make music sentiment analyzers. I just want to do my own. So thanks for coming. Thanks for listening to my chat. Are there any questions?